Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're continuing our reading of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And currently, we are reading from the third canto. And we've progressed all the way to chapter 28. We finished 28. And now we're in 29. At text number 1. And the title of this chapter is Explanation of Devotional Service by Lord Kapila. Everyone okay? Okay. Outside, People's Party, fine? Thank you. Here we go. Explanation of Devotional Service by Lord Kapila. Devahuti inquired, "My dear Lord, you have already very scientifically described the symptoms of the total material nature and the characteristics of the spirit according to the Sankhya system of philosophy. Now I shall request you to explain the path of devotional service, which is the ultimate end of all philosophical systems." Purport. In this 29th chapter, the glories of devotional service are elaborately explained, and the influence of time on the conditioned soul is also described. The purpose of elaborately describing the influence of time is to detach the conditioned soul from his material activities, which are considered to be simply a waste of time. In the previous chapter, material nature, the spirit, and the Supreme Lord or Supersoul are analytically studied. And in this chapter, the principles of Bhakti Yoga or devotional service, the execution of activities in the eternal relationship between the living entities and the personality of Godhead are explained. Bhakti Yoga, devotional service, is the basic principle of all systems of philosophy. All philosophy which does not aim for devotional service to the Lord is considered merely mental speculation. But of course, Bhakti Yoga with no philosophical basis is more or less sentiment. There are two classes of men. Some consider themselves intellectually advanced and simply speculate and meditate, and others are sentimental and have no philosophical basis for their propositions. Neither of these can achieve the highest goal of life, or if they do, it will take them many, many years. Vedic literature therefore suggests that there are three elements, namely the Supreme Lord, the living entity, and their eternal relationship. And the goal of life is to follow the principles of bhakti or devotional service and ultimately attain to the planet of the Supreme Lord in full devotion and love as an eternal servitor of the Lord. Sankhya philosophy is the analytical study of all existence. One has to understand everything by examining its nature and characteristics. This is called acquirement of knowledge. But one should not simply acquire knowledge without reaching the goal of life or the basic principle for acquiring knowledge, Bhakti Yoga. If we give up Bhakti Yoga and simply busy ourselves in the analytical study of the nature of things as they are, then the result will be practically nil. It is stated in the Bhagavatam that such engagement is something like husking a paddy. There's no use beating the husk if the grain has already been removed. By the scientific study of material nature, the living entity, and the supersoul, one has to understand the basic principle of devotional service to the Lord. Text 3. Devahuti continued, "My dear Lord, please also describe in detail, both for me and for people in general, the continual process of birth and death. For by hearing of such calamities, we may become detached from the activities of this material world." Purport. In this verse, the word samsriti is very important. Shreya Sriti means the prosperous path of advancement towards the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Samsriti means the continued journey on the path of birth and death towards the darkest region of material existence. People who have no knowledge of this material world, God, and their actual intimate relationship with Him are actually going to the darkest region of material existence in the name of progress in the material advancement of civilization. To enter the darkest region of material existence means to enter into a species of life other than the human species. Ignorant men do not know that after this life they are completely under the grip of material nature and will be offered a life which may not be very congenial. How a living entity gets different kinds of bodies will be explained in the next chapter. This continual change of bodies in birth and death is called samsara. Devahuti requests her glorious son, Kapila Muni, to explain about this continued journey to impress upon the conditioned souls that they are undergoing a path of degradation by not understanding the path of bhakti yoga, devotional service. Text 4. Please also describe eternal time, which is a representation of your form, and by whose influence people in general engage in the performance of pious activities. Purport. However ignorant one may be regarding the path of good fortune and the path down to the darkest region of ignorance, everyone is aware of the influence of eternal time, which devours all the effects of our material activities. The body is born at a certain time, and immediately the influence of time acts upon it. From the date of the birth of the body, the influence of death is also acting. The advancement of age entails the influence of time on the body. If a man is 30 or 50 years old, then the influence of time has already devoured 30 or 50 years of the duration of his life. Everyone is conscious of the last stage of life, when he will meet the cruel hands of death. But some consider their age and circumstances concern themselves with the influence of time and thus engage in pious activities so that in the future they will not be put into a low family or an animal species. Generally, people are attached to sense enjoyment and so aspire for life on the heavenly planets. Therefore, they engage themselves in charitable or other pious activities. But actually, as stated in Bhagavad Gita, one cannot get relief from the chain of birth and death, even if he goes to the highest planet, Brahmaloka, because the influence of time is present everywhere within this material world. In the spiritual world, however, the time factor has no influence. Pardon? Oh, sure. Yeah, no problem. Here, right? Okay. My dear Lord, text 5, you are just like the sun, for you illuminate the darkness of the conditional life of the living entities. Because their eyes of knowledge are not open, they are sleeping eternally in that darkness without your shelter. And therefore they are falsely engaged by the actions and reactions of their material activities, and they appear to be very fatigued. Purport. It appears that Srimati Devahuti, the glorious mother of Lord Kapiladev, is very compassionate for the regrettable condition of people in general, who, not knowing the goal of life, are sleeping in the darkness of illusion. It is the general feeling of the Vaishnava, or devotee of the Lord, that he should awaken them. Similarly, Devahuti is requesting her glorious son to illuminate the lives of the conditioned souls, so that their most regrettable conditional life may be ended. The Lord is described herein as Yoga Bhaskara, the son of the system of all yoga. Devahuti has already requested her glorious son to describe Bhakti Yoga. And the Lord has described Bhakti Yoga as the ultimate yoga system. Bhakti Yoga is the sun-like illumination for delivering the conditioned souls, whose general condition is described here. They have no eyes to see their own interests. They do not know that the goal of life is not to increase the material necessities of existence, because the body will not exist more than a few years. The living beings are eternal, and they have their eternal need. If one engages only in caring for the necessities of the body, not caring for the eternal necessities of life, then he is part of a civilization whose advancement puts the living entities in the darkest region of ignorance. Sleeping in that darkest region, one does not get any refreshment, but rather gradually becomes fatigued. He invents many processes to adjust this fatigue condition, but he fails and thus remains confused. The only path for mitigating his fatigue is the struggle for existence, is the path of devotional service, or the path of Krishna consciousness. Text 6. Sri Maitreya said, O best amongst the Kurus, the great sage Kapila, moved by great compassion and pleased by the words of his glorious mother, spoke as follows. Purport: Lord Kapila was very satisfied by the request of his glorious mother, because she was thinking not only in terms of her personal salvation, but in terms of all the fallen conditioned souls. The Lord is always compassionate towards the fallen souls of this material world, and therefore he comes himself or sends his confidential servants to deliver them. Since he is perpetually compassionate towards them, if some of his devotees also become compassionate towards them, he is very pleased with the devotees. In Bhagavad Gita, it is clearly stated that persons who are trying to elevate the condition of the fallen souls by preaching the conclusion of Bhagavad Gita, namely, full surrender unto the personality of Godhead, are very dear to him. Thus, when the Lord saw that his beloved mother was very compassionate towards the fallen souls, he was pleased, and he also became compassionate towards her. Text number 7. Lord Kapila, the personality of Godhead, replied, O noble lady, there are multifarious paths of devotional service in terms of the different qualities of the executor. Purport: pure devotional service in Krishna consciousness is one, because in pure devotional service there is no demand from the devotee to be fulfilled by the Lord. But generally people take to devotional service with a purpose. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, people who are not purified take to devotional service with 4 purposes. A person who is distressed because of material conditions becomes a devotee of the Lord and approaches the Lord for mitigation of his distress. A person in need of money approaches the Lord to ask for some improvement in his monetary condition. Others who are not in distress or in need of monetary assistance but are seeking knowledge in order to understand the absolute truth also take to devotional service, and they inquire into the nature of the Supreme Lord. This is very nicely described in Bhagavad Gita 7:16. Actually, the path of devotional service is one without a second, but according to the devotee's condition, devotional service appears in multifarious varieties, as will be explained in the following verses. Text 8. Devotional service executed by a person who is envious, proud, violent, and angry, and who is a separatist, is considered to be in the mode of darkness. Purport: it has already been stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st Canto, 2nd chapter, that the highest, most glorious religion is the attainment of causeless, unmotivated devotional service. In pure devotional service, the only motive should be to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is not actually a motive. That is the pure condition of the living entity. In the conditioned stage, when one engages in devotional service, he should follow the instruction of the bona fide spiritual master in full surrender. The spiritual master is the manifested representation of the Supreme Lord, because he receives and presents the instructions of the Lord as they are by disciplic succession. It is described in Bhagavad Gita that the teachings therein should be received by disciplic succession, otherwise there is adulteration. To act under the direction of a bona fide spiritual master with a motive to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead is pure devotional service. But if one has a motive for personal sense gratification, his devotional service is manifested differently. Such a man may be violent, proud, envious, and angry, and his interests are separate from the Lord's. One who approaches the Supreme Lord to render devotional service, but who is proud of his personality, envious of others, or vengeful, is in the mode of anger. He thinks that he is the best devotee. Devotional service executed in this way is not pure. It is mixed and is of the lowest grade, tamasa. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur advises that a Vaishnav who is not of good character should be avoided. A Vaishnav is one who has taken the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the ultimate goal of life. But if one is not pure and still has motives, then he is not a Vaishnav of the first order of good character. One may offer his respects to such a Vaishnav because he has accepted the Supreme Lord as the ultimate goal of life, but one should not keep company with a Vaishnav who is in the mode of ignorance. Text 9. The worship of deities in the temple by a separatist with a motive for material enjoyment, fame, and opulence is devotion in the mode of passion. Purport. The word separatist must be understood carefully. The Sanskrit words in this connection are binna drik and pratag bhavaha. A separatist is one who sees his interest as separate from that of the Supreme Lord. Mixed devotees or devotees in the modes of passion and ignorance think that the interest of the Supreme Lord is supplying the orders of the devotee. The interest of such devotees is to draw from the Lord as much as possible for their sense gratification. This is the separatist mentality. Actually, pure devotion is explained in the previous chapter. The mind of the Supreme Lord and the mind of the devotee should be dovetailed. A devotee should not wish anything but to execute the desire of the Supreme. That is oneness. When the devotee has an interest or will different from the interest of the Supreme Lord, his mentality is that of a separatist. When the so-called devotee desires material enjoyment without reference to the interest of the Supreme Lord, or he wants to become famous or opulent by utilizing the mercy or grace of the Supreme Lord, he is in the mode of passion. Mayavadis, however, interpret this word separatist in a different way. They say that while worshiping the Lord, one should think himself one with the Supreme Lord. This is another adulterated form of devotion within the modes of material nature. The conception that the living entity is one with the Supreme is in the mode of ignorance. Oneness is actually based on oneness of interest. A pure devotee has no interest but to act on behalf of the Supreme Lord. When one has even a tinge of personal interest, his devotion is mixed with the three modes of material nature. Text 10. When a devotee worships the Supreme Lord, when a devotee worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead and offers the results of his activities in order to free himself from the inebrities of fruit of activities, his devotion is in the mode of goodness. Just trying to build a little suspense. Purport. The Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras, along with the Brahmacharis, Grihastas, Vanaprasthas, and Sannyasis, are the members of the 8 divisions of Varnas and Ashramas. And they have their respective duties to perform for the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When such activities are performed and the results are offered to the Supreme Lord, They are called karmarpanam, duties performed for the satisfaction of the Lord. If there is any inebriety or fault, ask Webster the different pronunciations of that word. Inebriety? Is that the only version?
It's the only one that's there.
Okay, that's it then. Inebriety it is. When such activities, moving up a sentence, when such activities are performed and the results, and give the definition when I get to it. When such activities are performed and the results are offered to the Supreme Lord, they are called karmarpanam, duties performed for the satisfaction of the Lord. If there is any inebriety or fault, it is atoned for by this offering process. Go ahead.
Inebriety is a noun. The definition is the state of being inebriated, drunkenness. Synonyms are drunkenness, inebriation, intoxication. First known use is in 1801. And here, on a different definition, different dictionary, it says to inebriate, to make drunk, to intoxicate. Derivatives, it says here, late Middle English, from Latin inebriatus, past particle of inebriare, intoxicate, based on ebrius, which means drunk.
Any historic uses, archaic definitions? Gotta look in the OED.
I'm on it.
Do you have an OED? Oh, you have to subscribe to it. They won't let you go for free. Okay, Prabhupada uses that word a lot. If there is any inebriety or fault, it is atoned for by this offering process. But if this offering process is in the mode of goodness rather than in pure devotion, then the interest is different. The 4 ashramas and the 4 varnas act for some benefit in accordance with their personal interests. Therefore, such activities are in the mode of goodness. They cannot be counted in the category of pure devotion. Pure devotional service, as described by Rupa Goswami, is free from all desires. Anyabhilashita shunyam. There can be no excuse for personal or material interest. Devotional activities should be transcendental to fruitive activities and empiric philosophical speculation. Pure devotional service is transcendental to all material qualities. Devotional service in the mode of ignorance, passion, and goodness can be divided into 81 categories. There are different devotional activities such as hearing, chanting, remembering, worshipping, offering prayer, rendering service, and surrendering everything. And each one of them can be divided into 3 qualitative categories. There is hearing in the mode of passion, in the mode of ignorance, and in the mode of goodness. Similarly, there is chanting in the mode of ignorance, passion, and goodness, etc. 3 multiplied by 9 equals 27, and when again multiplied by 3, it becomes 81. One has to transcend all such mixed materialistic devotional service in order to reach the standard of pure devotional service as explained in the next verses. Swami Prash. Those things you gave me yesterday, you have them with you? Okay. Well, I don't want you to miss anything. Okay. We'll just take a moment, see if there's any reflection or question. Yes, Bhanabhata Prabhu?
Hare Krishna. I'm wondering if these different categories of devotional service in the different modes, like Kapila Dev mentions there are 81 different categories. Do you know where they might be found? Or more details?
At an ISKCON temple near you during japa or sometime at a time? I'm looking right now to see if there's more from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. 329, 11 through 12. The qualities of pure bhakti mentioned in 3:25-32 are here mentioned again for easy understanding. Oh, actually, I'm going back one. This is from 10, because that's the one we just finished. He worships, talking about the person in goodness, worshiping in goodness. What a cheap little thing. Only gives one at a time. Work with me. One's all I can extract. Even though it sounds like there's a multitude in there.
That's so you don't become inebriated.
He worships with the intention of destroying karma. His goal in bhakti is to destroy karma. I'm talking about the one in goodness, and I'm just doing a sample to see if there's any more detail. He worships in such a way that his actions are offered to the Lord. He performs bhakti of hearing and chanting, but filled with offering of occupational duties. He worships out of duty, having obtained rules for daily rites. He worships while performing his duties of his ashrama, thinking that his worship is similar to his execution of ashram duties. He has a desire for liberation, pratak bhava. The 9 types of bhakti, 3 types of tamasic, rajasic, and sattvic bhakti, sakamba bhakti, are successively superior. Sattvic bhakti produces some sort of knowledge. When jnana is secondary and bhakti is primary or predominant, it is called Gyan Mishra Bhakti, which produces Shanti Rati in the spiritual world, beyond the 3 gunas. If jnana predominates and bhakti is secondary, bhakti being a mere anga of jnana, then it produces Sayuja Mukti, bhakti mixed with karmas, such as a horse sacrifice, with a desire for material gain, with some offering of actions and attachment to results, but not offering of all actions, produces Salokya, liberation with happiness and powers. If one performs bhakti and offers some karmas without desires for results, it produces Shanti Rati. Though Rajasic and Tamasic bhakti produce results, the performers generally get material results. However, the results will be greater than usual because of the power of bhakti in terms of yielding devotional results. In some cases, such bhakti will with time become pure bhakti, as illustrated by the following verse. Satyam disyatyartam artito nirnam navartato yat puna artita yata swayam vidate bhajatam anichatam ichapitanam nijapadapallabam. That is, the Lord certainly gives desired objects to devotees who request them, but he does not give in such a way that the devotee will ask again after finishing his enjoyment. His lotus feet. He gives his lotus feet, which include all desirables, to those worshippers who do not desire them. His lotus feet include all desirables. That's all we need to know. And I think it's not going to give very specifics, but the main thing is the intention behind whatever activity one's doing, as indicated here. If one's doing to nullify karma, or if one's doing in a mode of anger, as one wants to prove something or annihilate somebody else's practice of bhakti by showing them up by theirs or something like that.
The reason I was asking for more clarification is because in my own chanting, sometimes I think I'm heading towards that I'm chanting with the intention of developing pure devotional service. But in the process of doing that and coming across some of these deep anarthas, sometimes I feel my consciousness falls into this deep abyss. And all of a sudden I feel like my chanting is extremely motivated, and it brings up certain fears, and the tendency myself sometimes is to just stop because it's sometimes it feels too overwhelming and confusing. So that was why I was asking for kind of to get more. I mean, it's helpful, but I just wanted to go a little deeper in that.
I was one just an observation, and to continue the conversation about anartas, is that acknowledging anartas means that we're noticing them. One of the ways that anartas are perpetuated is if I don't admit that they're there, I ignore them, I maintain them, even maintaining material desires even after understanding so many instructions in the matter. The very fact that one could see that, you can look in and say, oh, that's not pure devotional service, that's an anarta. That's the beginning of rooting out a particular anarta, is being able to objectify it and see that it's there. That's why there are long lists. There are lists elsewhere, for instance, in the story of the Gudicha Marjana, that Prabhupada paraphrases, or no, actually he quotes directly, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's long list of various types of anartas, and having that list in mind, it makes it more likely that we would see it, and because we notice that it's an aberrant thought and that it's not wanted, that's like the first stage, bring the light of consciousness to it.
That's true, and anyway, I don't want to get too much in it because.
Well, just one other thought, and that is that what to do about it. At least one general instruction is the Padma Purana says, Nama parayuktanam namanyeva harantyagam avishrani prayuktani tanye vartakarani cha. That if you have anartas, so what is the prescription? It's to keep chanting. Don't stop.
Thank you.
Thank you for such an important point. And I see a hand up, but I can't see who it's connected to, because your face is that Prabhupada Priya? I can't see. It is, right?
Hare Krishna. Yes, it's me.
Okay.
Yeah, I was in relation to this devotional service in the modes. Recently I gave a presentation at a retreat, and it was about reading Srila Prabhupada's books, trying to encourage devotees to read Prabhupada's books and go deeper. And in the presentation, I did an analysis of reading Prabhupada's books in the 3 modes. So it was kind of fun. So mode of ignorance is like you fall asleep while you're reading, or you're reading, begrudgingly. Then mode of passion is one way it can manifest is like this mood of achievement, that I'm going to finish the Bhagavatam and 6 months or something, and just like racing through it, and
23 days.
Yeah, or like competing with someone else, that I'm going to finish it before you kind of thing. It's like I'm going to, like this mood of achieve and conquer. Or else, and this could also be mixed passion ignorance, is that you're reading Prabhupada's books, but you're doing it for the purpose of finding some, quotes to basically either support your, your philosophical agenda or defeat somebody else's or something. Then a mode of goodness is that, you're reading as a matter of duty because, you've been encouraged to do so by your gurus and mentors, and you're doing it in a regulated way like that. And then transcendental in Shuddha Sattva is that it's beyond a sense of duty. You're reading with taste, you're reading with a pure desire to please Guru and Krishna, and you're going very deep into it. You're reading very prayerfully. And then from that, I kind of like took everyone into a whole process called prayerful reading. So, yeah, I think it's important for devotees to understand that, like, you know, it's one thing that, yeah, we should read Prabhupada's books, but we should also make sure we're reading it in the purest way possible without the influences of the lower modes.
Thank you very much. Very helpful. We have a lot outside. Devavrata, then we have Mahendra Prabhu, and I can't see whose hand is attached there. Is that Charan Arvinda? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Go
Just
ahead.
following up on Prabhupada Pira's seminar presentation, I heard Bhaktivedanta Maharaj explain something similar. And he said the mode of passion means studying for the purpose of collecting information to look like a very learned preacher. It's like a desire for name and fame on the basis of one's learning. Just another addition to these studies of the in the different modes.
Thank you. We'll add it to the list. Mahendra Prabhu.
I have a question about the word you mentioned. It's in many places. Srila Prabhupada uses that in ebriety. And because it seems in most of the places the context is something like fault or impurity. And can we take it like a peculiar usage of Srila Prabhupada? Also like the word sanguine, he's using it as pure usually, but the meaning is like, yeah, some energetic. And so will that be a proper interpretation of the usage?
It could be. And it's helpful to look at the OED and kind of idea the history of the word, and then it makes it more likely that you can say, oh, I get to see what era. The OED, in case anybody's, it's the Oxford English Dictionary, has a format where can't hear. Well, that defeats the whole purpose. Can you hear now?
Yes.
I'll repeat. Saying that's very likely is the case. And as Prabhupada's education dates back a few years, and language has a way of, morphing over time. Certain words change meanings or contexts, or go out of usage, and then they're preserved in somebody's writings from a particular era. And I was continuing by saying it's helpful to look at different references, especially the Oxford English Dictionary, because the format there gives a history of the usage, when it was first used and when it was second used, third used, and how it changed, the meaning changed over time. So looking at any of these words that seem misfitting can be very helpful to look at the history of them and see, oh, the meaning back then was different than from when it is right now. But I think it's an important exercise in reading Prabhupada's books is not to skip over things. I mean, last year we had such a revelation, didn't we, when we looked up the term will-o'-the-wisp. Remember that? That was a stunning moment because there's a way in which that phrase is a metaphor for various things. One of them is there's a way in which in swamps certain plant matter can spontaneously combust and create a phosphorus-like light, phosphoresque light in the distance that misleads travelers. They think it's a beacon, but they end up in a swamp somewhere. And it also has a meaning of Will, a person named Will, who was a character from bygone age of somebody who's a kind of spirit, like Casper the Friendly Ghost when I was a kid, who only will-o'-the-wisp is not friendly. They're sinister, It would mislead travelers by showing a light in the darkness, and then it would take them off the path. So it's an enriching process when reading Prabhupada's books to find out, why did he use the word, where did it come from, what does it actually mean? In general, it's helpful, because if we're using a language and somebody deliberately used a word, it's much more meaningful, and we remember it more clearly when we're able to get it precisely. What to speak of the fact that when you know a particular word and you can go into its history and it has some deeper meaning, that it's a very interesting talking point when speaking to people. I oftentimes, when I'm stymieing and I'm stuck in writing, I say, okay, what do the words mean? I go, what does this word mean? What is that? Even if I think I know what it means, and if I look into it, I think, oh, okay, I see. There's something to this that can be expressed. The longish answer to a simple question, but it's one that I think makes the readings more interesting, and maybe not as, maybe more purposeful, and maybe going past the mode of goodness even. Trying to get out of the mode of goodness or passion or ignorance. Go ahead, Charna Ravinda Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. I'm just trying to understand the process by which Kapila Dev gets Devahuti to the stage of revealing knowledge of Bhakti Yoga, because in chapter 25, when Devahuti, Kapila Dev appeared before Devahuti, she expressed her desire for transcendental realization. And then in text 26 and 27, Kapila Dev explains the fundamental principles of material nature, like the false ego, the three modes, and the senses. And then in 28, he reveals the process of yoga. And 4 chapters later, he's now talking about the process of devotional service. So it seems she was very qualified and ready for transcendental knowledge straight away when she approached him. Yep. She seems very ready for transcendental realization when she approached him. So why did he give her all this other information?
Well, let me ask you a question. What kind of effect is the order of the chapters having on you so far? Is it leaving you feeling, does it seem disjointed, or are you jumping in your heart for joy because it's so revealing?
Yeah, it definitely gives me a sense of detachment from the material nature, and it's also not worth diving into yoga because it doesn't give me the highest results. So it seems like a gradual process of detaching the mind or the tendency to want to gravitate towards these things. So it's
closer to jumping for joy in your heart because you're seeing the way forward, right?
Yes.
So I think your question is a good one, and it's important. We could go back and look at it from that point of view, or maybe somebody already has it in his or her mind, how it's all laid out, which would likely be from a Bhakti Vaibhav class somewhere with some very cerebral teacher who lays out the whole thing. But in general, I'm finding it to be a unfolding process with the right mixture of analyzation of how I'm not my body, how the super soul is right there, and then it seems as if it's in reach, the whole idea. And also what we're going into now. Not a very detailed or probably sanguine answer, but that's I'm just thinking the overall effect is probably pretty powerful. If somebody else has an idea about the structure and the way the Kapila Dev's teaching, would love to hear about it. Okay, so was there anybody else in the outside People's Party? Okay, we have one last comment from His Grace Bhanabhata Prabhu.
Yeah, kind of obviously, I think why Kapila is explaining things the way he does because he's explaining Sankhya Yoga, which means to analyze things. And so he's going through the whole process of analyzation so that when we get up into the higher areas of devotional service, which, as it was recently explained, is the ultimate philosophical understanding of every other philosophical system, it makes sense that he would analyze it in such a way to gradually give knowledge of the different categories.
Thanks, Bana. And speaking of the upper echelons, because we've come to the verse which is a verse that describes devotional service beyond the modes. Are we all ready for it? Having heard Sankhya and other means of understanding the difference between matter and spirit. Ready? Text 11 and 12. The manifestation of unadulterated devotional service is exhibited when one's mind is at once attracted to hearing the transcendental name and qualities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead who is residing in everyone's heart. Just as the water of the Ganges flows naturally down towards the ocean, such devotional ecstasy, uninterrupted by any material condition, flows towards the Supreme Lord. Purport: the basic principle of this unadulterated pure devotional service is the love of Godhead. Madguna Shruti Matrena means just after hearing about the transcendental qualities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. These qualities are called nirguna. The Supreme Lord is uncontaminated by the modes of material nature. Therefore, he is attractive to the pure devotee. There is no need to practice meditation to attain such attraction. The pure devotee is already in the transcendental stage, and the affinity between him and the Supreme Personality of Godhead is natural and is compared to the Ganges water flowing towards the sea. The flow of the Ganges water cannot be stopped by any condition. Similarly, a pure devotee's attraction for the transcendental name, form, and pastimes of the Supreme Godhead cannot be stopped by any material condition. The word avichinna, without interruptions, is very important in this connection. No material condition can stop the flow of the devotional service of a pure devotee. The word ahaituki means without reason. A pure devotee does not render loving service to the personality of Godhead for any cause or for any benefit, material or spiritual. This is the first symptom of unalloyed devotion. Anyabhilashita shunyam. He has no desire to fulfill by rendering devotional service. He has no desire to fulfill by rendering devotional service. Such devotional service is meant for the Purushottam, the Supreme Personality, and not for anyone else. Sometimes pseudo-devotees show devotion to many demigods, thinking the forms of the demigods to be the same as the Supreme Personality of Godhead's form. It is specifically mentioned herein, however, that bhakti, devotional service, is meant only for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayan, Vishnu, or Krishna, not for anyone else. Avyavahita means without cessation. A pure devotee must engage in the service of the Lord 24 hours a day without cessation. His life is so molded that at every minute and every second he engages in some sort of devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Another meaning of the word avyavahita is that the interest of the devotee and the interest of the Supreme Lord are on the same level. The devotee has no interest but to fulfill the transcendental desire of the Supreme Lord. Such spontaneous service unto the Supreme Lord is transcendental and is never contaminated by the material modes of nature. These are the symptoms of pure devotional service, which is free from all contamination of material nature. Salokya sarshi samipya sarupyaikatvam apyuta Diyamanam nagrananti vina mat sevanam jana. A pure devotee does not accept any kind of liberation, salokya, sarshti, samipya, sarupya, or ekatva, even though they are offered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport. Lord Chaitanya teaches us how to execute pure devotional service out of spontaneous love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the Shikshashtaka, he prays to the Lord, O Lord, I do not wish to gain from you any wealth, nor do I wish to have a beautiful wife, nor do I wish to have many followers. All I want from you is that in life after life I may remain a pure devotee at your lotus feet. There is a similarity between the prayers of Lord Chaitanya and the statements of Srimad Bhagavatam. Lord Chaitanya prays, in life after life, indicating that a devotee does not even desire the cessation of birth and death. The yogis and empiric philosophers desire cessation from the process of birth and death, but a devotee is satisfied to remain even in this material world and execute devotional service. It is clearly stated herein that a pure devotee does not desire ekatva, oneness with the Supreme Lord, as desired by the impersonalists, the mental speculators, and the meditators. To become one with the Supreme Lord is beyond the dream of a pure devotee. Sometimes he may accept promotion to the Vaikuntha planets to serve the Lord there, but he will never accept merging into the Brahman effulgence, which he considers worse than hellish. Such ekatva, or merging into the effulgence of the Supreme Lord, is called kaivalya. But the happiness derived from kaivalya is considered by the pure devotee to be hellish. The devotee is so fond of rendering service to the Supreme Lord that the 5 kinds of liberation are not important to him. If one is engaged in pure transcendental loving service to the Lord, it is understood that he has already achieved the 5 kinds of liberation. When a devotee is promoted to the spiritual world, Vaikuntha, he receives 4 kinds of facilities. One of these is Salokya, living on the same planet as the Supreme Personality. The Supreme Person in his different plenary expansions lives on innumerable Vaikuntha planets, and the chief planet is Krishnaloka. Just as within the material universe, the chief planet is the sun. In the spiritual world, the chief planet is Krishnaloka. From Krishnaloka, the bodily effulgence of Lord Krishna is distributed not only to the spiritual world, but to the material world as well. It is covered by matter, however, in the material world. In the spiritual world, there are innumerable Vaikuntha planets, and on each one, the Lord is the predominating deity. A devotee can be promoted to one such Vaikuntha planet to live with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In Sarshti liberation, the opulence of the Lord, in Sarshti liberation, the opulence of the devotee is equal to the opulence of the Supreme Lord. Samipya means to be a personal associate of the Lord. In Sarupya liberation, the bodily features of the Lord are exactly like those of the Supreme Person, but for 2 or 3 symptoms found exclusively on the transcendental body of the Lord. In Sarshti, Samipya means to be a personal associate of the Supreme Lord, and Sarupya liberation, the bodily features of the devotee are exactly like those of the Supreme Person, but for 2 or 3 symptoms found exclusively on the transcendental body of the Lord. Srivatsa, for example, the hair on the chest of the Lord, particularly distinguishes him from his devotees. A pure devotee does not accept these 5 kinds of spiritual existence, even if they're offered, and he certainly does not hanker after material benefits, which are all insignificant in comparison with spiritual benefits. When Prahlad Maharaj was offered some material benefit, he stated, "My Lord, I have seen that my father achieved all kinds of material benefits, and even the demigods were afraid of his opulence. But still in a second, you have finished his life and all of his material prosperity." What's the verse? Trishta maya divi vibho kila dishnapanam ayushriyo vivam ichati yanjanoyam yesmat kupita hasa vijimbrita vru vispurjite nalulita satute nirastaha. For a devotee, there is no question of desiring any material or spiritual prosperity. He simply aspires to serve the Lord. That is his highest happiness. What's his highest happiness? Correct. Text number 14. By attaining the highest platform of devotional service, as I have explained, one can overcome the influence of the three modes of material nature and be situated in the transcendental stage, as is the Lord. Purport. Sripad Shankaracharya, who is supposed to be the leader of the impersonalist school of philosophers, has admitted in the beginning of his comments on Bhagavad Gita that Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is beyond the material creation. Except for him, everything is within the material creation. It is also confirmed in the Vedic literature that before the creation, there was only Narayan. Neither Lord Brahma nor Lord Shiva existed. Only Narayan, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu or Krishna, is always in the transcendental position, beyond the influence of material creation. The material qualities of goodness, passion, and ignorance cannot affect the position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, he is called nirguna, free from all tinges of material quality. Here, the same fact is confirmed by Lord Kapila. One who is situated in pure devotional service is transcendentally situated, as is the Lord. Just as the Lord is unaffected by the influence of the material modes, so too are his pure devotees. One who is not affected by the three modes of material nature is called a liberated soul, or Brahmabhuta soul. Brahmabhuta Prasannatma is the stage of liberation. Aham Brahmasmi, I am not this body. This is applicable only to the person who constantly engages in the devotional service of Krishna and is thus in the transcendental stage. He is above the influence of the three modes of material nature. It is the misconception of the impersonalists that one can worship any imaginary form of the Lord, or Brahman, and at the end merge in the Brahman effulgence. Of course, to merge into the bodily effulgence, Brahman, of the Supreme Lord is also liberation, as explained in the previous verse. A kattva is also liberation, but that sort of liberation is never accepted by any devotee, for qualitative oneness is immediately attained as soon as one is situated in devotional service. For a devotee, that qualitative equality, which is the result of impersonal liberation, is already attained. He does not have to try for it separately. It is clearly stated here that simply by pure devotional service, one becomes qualitatively as good as the Lord himself. Everyone okay? I mean, why wouldn't you be okay? You're sitting here in the Dham, hearing the Bhagavatam, right? What kind of question is that, Vaiśeṣika? Okay, text 15. A devotee must execute his prescribed duties, which are glorious, without material profit, without excessive violence. One should regularly perform one's devotional activities. Purport. One has to execute his prescribed duties according to his social position as a Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra. The prescribed duties of the four classes of men in human society are also described in Bhagavad Gita. The activities of Brahmanas are to control the senses and to become simple, clean, learned devotees. The Kshatriyas have the spirit for ruling. They are not afraid on the battlefield, and they are charitable. The Vaishyas, or the mercantile class of men, trade in commodities, protect cows, develop agricultural produce. The Shudras, or laborer class, serve the higher classes because they themselves are not very intelligent. From every position, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Swakarma tam abhyarchya, one can serve the Supreme Lord by performing one's prescribed duty. It is not that only the Brahmanas can serve the Supreme Lord and not the Shudras. Anyone can serve the Supreme Lord by performing his prescribed duties under the direction of a spiritual master or representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. No one should think that his prescribed duties are inferior. A Brahmana can serve the Lord by using his intelligence, and a Kshatriya can serve the Supreme Lord by using his military arts, just as Arjuna served Krishna. Arjuna was a warrior. He had no time to study Vedanta or other highly intellectual books. The damsels of Vrajadam were girls born of the Vaishya class, and they engaged in protecting cows and producing agriculture. Krishna's foster father, Nanda Maharaj, and his associates were all Vaishyas. They were not at all educated, but they could serve Krishna by loving him and by offering everything to him. Similarly, there are many instances in which Chandalas, or those lower than Shudras, have served Krishna. Also, the sage Vidura was considered a Shudra because his mother happened to be a Shudra. There are no distinctions, for it is declared by the Lord in Bhagavad Gita that anyone engaged specifically in devotional service is elevated to the transcendental position without a doubt. Everyone's prescribed duty is glorious if it is performed in devotional service of the Lord, without desire for profit. Such loving service must be performed without reason, without impediment, and spontaneously. Krishna is lovable, and one has to serve him in whatever capacity one can. That is pure devotional service. Another significant phrase in this verse is natim shrena, with minimum violence or sacrifice of life. Even if a devotee has to commit violence, it should not be done beyond what is necessary. Sometimes the question is put before us, you ask us not to eat meat, but you are eating vegetables. Do you think that is not violence? The answer is that eating vegetables is violence, and vegetarians are also committing violence against other living entities, because vegetables also have life. Non-devotees are killing cows, goats, and so many other animals for eating purposes. And a devotee who is vegetarian is also killing. But here, significantly, it is stated that every living entity has to live by killing another entity. That is the law of nature. Jivo jivasya jivanam. One living entity is the life for another living entity. But for a human being, that violence should be committed only as much as necessary. A human being is not to eat anything which is not offered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yajna shishta shina santa. One becomes freed from all sinful reactions by eating foodstuffs which are offered to Yajna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A devotee therefore eats only prasad, or foodstuffs, offered to the Supreme Lord. And Krishna says that when a devotee offers him foodstuffs from the vegetable kingdom, with devotion, he eats that. The vegetable kingdom. There's also vegetable tribes. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said we should preach to them. A devotee is to offer to Krishna foodstuffs prepared from vegetables. If the Supreme Lord wanted foodstuffs prepared from animal food, the devotee could offer this, but he does not order to do that. We have to commit violence. That is a natural law. We should not, however, commit violence extravagantly, but only as much as ordered by the Lord. Arjuna engaged in the art of killing, and although killing is, of course, violence, he killed the enemy simply on Krishna's order. In the same way, if we commit violence as it is necessary, by the order of the Lord. That is called natihimsa. We cannot avoid violence, for we are put into a conditional life in which we have to commit violence. But we should not commit more violence than necessary or than ordered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. 16. The devotee should regularly see my statues in the temple, touch my lotus feet, and offer worshipable paraphernalia in prayer. He should see in the spirit of renunciation from the mode of goodness and see every living entity as spiritual. Purport. Temple worship is one of the duties of a devotee. It is especially recommended for neophytes, but those who are advanced should not refrain from temple worship. There is a distinction in the manner of a neophyte and an advanced devotee. There is a distinction in the manner a neophyte and an advanced devotee appreciate the Lord's presence in the temple. A neophyte considers the Archa Vigraha, the statue of the Lord, to be different from the original personality of Godhead. He considers it a representation of the Supreme Lord in the form of a deity. But an advanced devotee accepts the deity in the temple as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He does not see any difference between the original form of the Lord and the statue, or Archa, form of the Lord in the temple. This is the vision of a devotee whose devotional service is in the highest stage of bhava, or love of Godhead, whereas a neophyte's worship in the temple is a matter of routine duty. Temple deity worship is one of the functions of a devotee. He goes regularly to see the deity nicely decorated, and with veneration and respect he touches the lotus feet of the Lord and presents offerings of worship, such as fruits, flowers, and prayers. At the same time, to advance in devotional service, the devotee should see other living entities as spiritual sparks, parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord. A devotee is to offer respect to every entity that has a relationship with the Lord. Because every living entity originally has a relationship with the Lord as part and parcel, a devotee should try to see all living entities on the same equal level of spiritual existence. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, a pandit, one who is learned, sees equally a very learned brahmana, a shudra, a hog, a dog, and a cow. He does not see the body, which is only an outward dress. He does not see the dress of a brahmana or that of a cow or a dog. He sees the spiritual spark, part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. If a devotee does not see every living entity as part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, he is considered prakrita bhakta, a materialistic devotee. He is not completely situated on the spiritual platform. Rather, he is in the lowest stage of devotion. He does, however, show all respect to the deity. Although a devotee sees all living entities on the level of spiritual existence, he is not interested in associating with everyone. Simply because a tiger is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord does not mean that we embrace him because of his spiritual relationship with the Supreme Lord. We must associate only with persons who have developed Krishna consciousness. We should befriend and offer special respect to persons who are developed in Krishna consciousness. Other living entities are undoubtedly part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, but because their consciousness is still covered and not developed in Krishna consciousness, we should renounce their association. It is said by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur that even if one is a Vaishnav, if he is not of good character, his company should be avoided, although he may be offered the respect of a Vaishnav. Anyone who accepts Vishnu as the Supreme Personality of Godhead is accepted as a Vaishnav, but a Vaishnav is expected to develop all the good qualities of the demigods. The exact meaning of the word Satvena is given by Sridhar Swami as being synonymous with Dharyena, or patience. One must perform devotional service with great patience. One should not give up the execution of devotional service because one or two attempts have not been successful. One must continue Sri Rupa Goswami also says that one should be very enthusiastic and execute devotional service with patience and confidence. Patience is necessary for developing the confidence that Krishna will certainly accept me because I am engaging in devotional service. One has only to execute service according to the rules and regulations to ensure success. So we'll take a few comments from Tara Prabhu. See what he's heard so far. Any thoughts he has. He didn't raise his hand, I just called on him.
Hare Krishna. Well, my memory is great, so I especially recall the last thing that was stated by Prabhupada, which is very wonderful, that one should adhere with determination to the practice of Krishna consciousness with the confidence that Krishna will certainly accept me because I'm engaging in devotional service. So that especially stood out for me as being very encouraging, considering my particular position, because sometimes there's a tendency to become hopeless, but Prabhupada, he's given great encouragement in this statement. Hare Krishna.
Thanks so much, Tara Prabhu. That was very helpful. Unadulterated Prabhu.
I just have a question.
Unadulterated Prabhu said he has a question, but he said it before he got the microphone, so
Okay.
I'm supplementing.
I should regularly see my statues in the temple. Usually, Prabhupada does not use the word statues. How come it is translated like this?
Well, he may have changed. He may have changed the phraseology as he went along. Because remember, third canto is in the first rendering of translations. He stopped at, I think, right after the third canto, went to the Krishna book, and then resumed the fourth canto after that. So that's one plausible theory. Although you could say murti, you can say statue, you could say deity, yeah, but even murti is used, iti murti abhidanena, but that means basically the same thing. Some of it is semantics and according to one's the context that somebody has. Probably we avoid statue because of what it means to people in America, which is in a museum or something outside and so forth. Anyway, that's my take on it. That may have switched over time, but you can ask ChatGPT if that theory is, or somebody can, if that theory is tenable. Can you ask ChatGPT if my theory is tenable? Did Prabhupada use the word statue after the third canto? Mahendra? Semantics for 500. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say about this sentence which Prabhupada mentioned for a second time in these few purports, that quoting Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, one should avoid a devotee, a Vaishnava, who is not of a good character, although respect should be given, because one is supposed to develop the good qualities of the demigods. So it seems that there is the emphasis of one's own responsibility to endeavor to develop good qualities to come to the level of real Vaishnava. Otherwise, other devotees could avoid you because of a not high quality character. But could you explain what it means that a good character in that sense here?
Well, when we talked about the 26 qualities of a pure devotee, in that context we also talked about how unalloyed devotion to the Lord is the most important. It's the defining character of all of them. If you have the other 25 but you don't have that one, then it's manorata. Manorati nasiti dabto. It can switch at any time, because the genesis of all those good qualities ultimately is devotion to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So there can be a case where one sees the determination of the devotee and that they're well situated in their devotional service, even though they have some rough qualities. As Prabhupada paraphrases the word apichet suduracharo in the 17th, his commentary in the 17th verse of the Sri Upanishad. And actually, I think he's speaking according to the words of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, that one may show some sense of worldliness, but because they're properly situated in their determination to become Krishna conscious, they're still to be considered saintly. So it's a matter of degree. If one sees somebody has some defect and doesn't live up to a lot of the qualities, but has that firm determination to be a devotee and is firmly fixed on Krishna, or is non-offensive towards devotees especially, then we can consider that even though they have rough qualities, that they're properly situated and therefore they're respectable. Actually, maybe I missed your question. Can you say it one more time really quick?
No, it was exactly what I was asked about. What means a good character, and you explain it wonderfully. And I just thought also about the explanation of the Bhaktivinoda Thakur Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati to the verse from Upadeshamrita, that one shouldn't see defects in a pure devotee's body. And usually what is meant is the physical imperfections, but also they mentioned it could refer to something in the character, but the examples are like being a little harsh or like that. So one may have that nature of harshness, but still be a pure devotee. And as I said, unalloyed dedication, devotion to Krishna, that's the most important. If it's there and if there is full dedication, one shouldn't try to find fault. And here good character is, in the first instance Prabhupada used it was in relation to the manifestation of the real gross tamasic, like envy, violence and pride and that kind of things, which when they come out you better stay a little at distance.
Yes. I would say personally, I find that a person's tendency to not criticize devotees noticeable. They avoid that, then I can tolerate. Of course, who am I to tolerate? I have all the worst qualities in the world, but I'm just saying that would be the point of demarcation. If the person has the presence of mind and the heart to not criticize devotees, to know the difference, to what it sounds like, to avoid that, then I would say it's worth the other rough edges. But if a person crosses that line, it contaminates me also, because then I lose my ability to appreciate the devotees who that person is criticizing through their overcritical nature. Unadulterated Prabhu, and then we'll go to Devavrata, and then we'll go to Narada, and then we'll go to, I'm sorry? And then is it Charan Aravinda has his hand up?
Yeah, I asked a question to the Transcend AI. Did Srila Prabhupada use the word statue after third canto? It says, based on the provided context, Srila Prabhupada does use the word statue in his purport and explanation, and it quotes the text 226 from Adilila. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, in the material world, a person and his photograph, picture or statue are different. But the statue of Lord Krishna and Krishna himself, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, are non-different because the Lord is absolute. This explanation highlights the philosophical understanding that while material representations like statues are Distinct from the persons, they represent the deity form of the Lord. It's not different from the Lord himself due to the transcendental nature.
Thank you very much. Okay, and then I said Devavrata, and then Narada, and then Charnaravinda Prabhu.
I'm looking at verse...
And then Prabhupada Priya.
Verse 10, 11, and 12 of this chapter. And it's devotional service in the mode of goodness, and then it transitions into devotional service in the Nirguna platform. My question is chanting for the purpose of purification considered to be which quality of devotional service would that be? Because we often hear that I'm doing this for my own purification and book distribution, and even with parikrama sometimes the purpose is just I want to be purified so I can serve better. So what that motivation, what modality of consciousness is that?
Well, just by reference and context, Prabhupada talks about how when we write something about Krishna, we should write for our own purification, and that's the standard. So he wouldn't recommend something that was contaminated by the modes of material nature. And by contrast, it's different from the karmarpanam idea that one has some material propensity and then offers that afterwards. If one's intention is to do something so that one can render better service, and that the idea is I'm doing it so that I can come to a higher level of devotional service, then I think by the context of what I just said, it could be considered to be in the line of pure devotional service. Since that's how Prabhupada said the Goswamis thought of the ways in which they wrote, and the way he thought, how he wrote, or what his intention was for writing Vaishnava scriptures. That's my evidence.
So then my question is that Tara and I were speaking about this last evening, that when we're going out, we're giving people an impression of the nirguna stage of life, and that it's so attractive for people. So even if one isn't firmly situated, if one's aspiring for it and taking due measures to come to that stage in a steady way, then someone can still leave that impression on the people that we're interacting with. So let's say for book distribution or preaching or prasadam, although we may not be fixed, that impression can still be left on people.
What impression?
An impression of this nirguna stage of pure devotion that people can...
So you're saying it's good?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely good.
Okay.
People don't meet people like that ever, practically, especially not in college. There's so much competition, and it's very fruitive going to college. The idea of academic education nowadays is really at a very low standard, much lower than the original intention of universities. And when people in that environment, or any other environment, corporate environment included or wherever, meet somebody who's humble because they're there for their own purification, there's a way in which, for instance, if somebody speaks to them in a certain way, they don't respond in kind. Well, if for instance, if someone speaks unkindly and then they notice the person doesn't respond in a passive-aggressive way, just as an example, that would be unusual in their world. And they would notice such a thing. And I've had instances, anecdotal evidence of that. I wrote about this in that book called Our Family Business, when I was once in Hawaii, and I was distributing books at Waikiki, and it was mostly honeymoon couples. I stopped a couple, I showed them a Bhagavatam, and they were Christians, so they said no way. And they also were demonstrative about how they didn't, not only didn't they want the book, but they would never give to something like this. And because I responded to them, the way I responded to them was because I was just happy to be there. I didn't expect a result from them, and I didn't even mind that at all that they didn't give. And I told them so. I said, no, I just appreciate that you took your valuable time. And if there were more people like you with faith in God, it would be a better world to live in. And when they left, and then they came back about a half hour later and said, we changed our mind, we want to donate. And I could see directly, because they were taken aback by, as to put it in the context, to say, okay, you're just doing it for your own purification. You know, you're not trying to rack up a score so you can win the marathon or something like that. But you're just there and happily engaged in devotional service. People notice it. And it's definitely out of the ordinary. Doesn't happen in this material world because it does leave them a nirguna samskar. Right? That's your phrase. I picked it up yesterday from your class. They get the nirguna samskar. All right, who's next? Yes, Narada Muni. Get you a nirguna samskar. Go ahead.
Here's what I'll do for you. I was just thinking about a similar story, actually, building upon what David Rajapur was talking about in the story you mentioned. I was in the subway of Port Authority, or not Port Authority, below the 7th Avenue, so on the 7th Avenue side, below the Q train, in Times Square. And I was setting up the book table for our daily Harinam and book distribution. And these two Christians came up, and it's kind of like the type where it's like a condescending, kind of like patronizing, passive-aggressive Christians, where they're kind of just
I
like...
never experienced that.
Patting, you kind of just get this like patting on the back. It's like, oh, yeah, but you're really not doing the right thing, you know. And they kept kind of like indirectly bashing what I was doing, because they came up, what's this all about? What do you got here? You know, classic questions that Christians usually ask. And it came to a point where they were kind of just like boasting about their philosophy. And I was just like, thank you so much for sharing your information. Please just pray for me that I have unmotivated desires to serve God. And they were so caught back by that idea that they just like were sitting there for a second, and they were like, I want to have that prayer too. Could you pray for me to do that also? And then they ended up taking either some small books or something like that. But I was just...
It's a showstopper.
Yeah.
Because it's a nirguna samskar. Who was next? Oh, you were still going. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I wanted to add
one
more
Not at all,
thing.
Please.
I was thinking about what Taraprabhu was saying, and it reminded me of that verse that's in the CC, but it's also in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Na prema shavanari bhakti rapiva yato nava vaishnavo jnanam ba shubhakarma yad kiyadho sadjyatir apyastiva hi nartha digasadike tvaitita pyachedya mula sati hey gopi janavalabha vyatayate ha ha madai shaivamam. This prayer that I don't have any love for you, I don't have any faith, I don't have any good kinds of qualities, I don't have mystic power, I don't have subject of a good birth, any practices of yoga and my benefit of bhakti and hearing, chanting. But because Krishna, you're hinartadika sadhake, someone who can bestow mercy upon even the most fallen aspirants, you have the capability of delivering me. And that hope of mine is always causing me pain in my heart. And I was just reflecting on what Taraprabhu was saying, that this power of hope is so powerful. Without hope, there's no use in our practice. So I was just reflecting on that and the beauty of it.
Thank you for the beautiful citation and perfectly inserted into the conversation. Yes, Pranahari.
Yeah, I was just reflecting on... I was thinking and reflecting on the also the Nirguna Bhakti verses, and thinking how the words also appear from the second chapter of the first canto, Haituki, and in this verse it was like avyavahita, but also meaning uninterrupted. So this causeless and uninterrupted is very juxtaposed to the previous three verses of the modes of nature, where there was some desire, and it's not a continuous flow. It's very much interrupted by. It's very much dependent on the fulfillment of that desire or not, and it made me think of actually one thing Damodar Maharaj said here some years ago, and he said that love is if what you get from what you do is not as valuable as just what you're doing, then it's not love, or vice versa. I don't know if I said that right. If you value the result of the bhakti or whatever you're doing, then it's more than what you're actually just doing. I guess in other words, the devotee is not wanting anything. They just want to do these angas of bhakti, which are now being described by Kapila Dev because they like it. They just want to please Krishna. That's all that they want to do. Whereas these other, the mixture of the modes gives some sort of impetus for a desire for some result from it, and that becomes the priority of what we're getting from it. So that's, I don't know, I was just thinking about how profound that actually is. These verses also, I thought about, it appears in the Chaitanya Charitamrita in Adi Lila chapter 4, where the love of the gopis is being described, the lust versus the love. These same verses from Kapila Dev are quoted and are used as pramana for showing this principle of Haituki Bhakti. So, yeah, just nice.
Thank you. It's a helpful distinction. Just to close the conversation and take our break.
Hey.
Prabhupada Priya, go ahead.
Should I go?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I did a little bit of mining here because I looked at when we were going to text 14, which says, by attaining the highest platform of devotional service, as I have explained, one can overcome the influence of the three modes of material nature and be situated in the transcendental stage, as is the Lord. So I was thinking, wait a minute here. We're already talking about transcendental devotional service beyond the modes. So he's saying that by doing transcendental service beyond the modes, one can overcome the influence of the three modes. There has to be more to it than that. So I kind of looked in the Sanskrit, and also adyantika means the end. Adyanta means like the end result. And then I saw the word there, matbhavaya, and I was thinking, oh, that looks like something significant. It looks like perhaps what's attainable is bhava, is love for Krishna, matbhavaya, love for me. And so I didn't want to speculate too much, so I took that thought and checked the Acharya's commentaries, and let me just, so Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says exactly that. He says that the last sentence of his commentary on this verse is, and by that bhakti one attains prema directed to me, madbhavaya. So that confirms the premonition that I had. And then also in the Sanskrit it says ati vrajya. So he kind of like puts a little vraj in there. So not only is it prema, but it's vraj prem is the end result of this transcendental devotional service. So there's a little bit of a reading between the lines, but I just thought there has to be more to it than just overcoming the three. Like that's not the end result of service that's already beyond the modes. And then, so I just wanted to...
You wanted to enter that into evidence.
Yeah, because
Okay.
it's very sweet, isn't
Duly
it?
noted. Yes, it is. And I'm making, as a final point before we take a break, the purport that I read from 329.10, which was in relationship to bhakti that is contaminated by goodness. And that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur quotes from the 5th canto, Satyam Dishati Artitam Artito Nirnam, Naivartito Yad Punar Artito Yata, Soyam Vidite, etc., which says that even if one does take to the process of devotional service in one of the lower modes and has some desire to be fulfilled, Krishna is so crafty or artful that he grants the desire, but in such a way that the person doesn't want it anymore. What's more, he wants to trade it in for Krishna. So even going back to the 2nd canto with Akama Sarva Kamo Va, Moksha Kama Udara Di Tivrena Bhakti Yogena Yajeta Purusham Param. So you have to start where you are. And even if one is in a particular mode and it seems implausible to perform Haituki Avyavahita bhakti at the present moment, if one continues, in any case, Krishna obviously helps to purify the practitioner who's determined and continues following the process. A simple point, but I just thought it was helpful as an end cap to this particular conversation. And now it's time to take a Gayatri break. It's already 13 minutes after 12, so come back here at 12:27 and 15 seconds. Gaur Premanande Haribol. See you soon.